All right, so I think we will go ahead and get started. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today for another installment of our RPC-MPO joint webinar series. We are really excited to have Allison Madison with us today. She's our newest CARPC staff member, and she's the manager of the Wisconsin SaltWise program. So I have a couple housekeeping items before we begin. First of all, everyone is muted. The webinar is being recorded. We will email everyone a link to the recording afterward, along with the slides and any other links to materials that we talk about during the presentation. The recording will also be available on our website, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can put them either in the chat or in the Q&A. Quick ones we might be able to answer during the presentation, if possible, and the rest we will go through at the end. All right, so as you may already know, the Wisconsin SaltWise program moved from the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District to CARPC earlier this year. This program is a great fit with our other collaborative water quality related work, notably our chloride management plan that we are currently implementing in the Starkweather Creek watershed. SaltWise is a statewide program, and being part of CARPC positions it to better connect with other Wisconsin RPCs and MS4 groups. And it also helps CARPC provide another form of assistance to the communities in our region. So as part of our official welcome, the goal of this webinar is to highlight all the things that SaltWise does to support municipalities and businesses across the state on their path to smarter salting. SaltWise is powered by Allison Madison, who's led the program since June of 2020. Allison has over a decade of experience in science and sustainability education, both in the formal classroom and in nature-based environmental education programs. Through her work with Wisconsin SaltWise, Allison collaborates and connects with people in every sector all over the state to further the program's chloride reduction goals and help keep our freshwater fresh. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Allison.
What an introduction. Thank you, Caitlin. And thanks again, everybody who's joining in. It was fun to see some familiar names show up on this list. So I know that we have some people in the audience that probably have some of their own stories that they could share. Invite you to do so, at least in the chat as you're able. And to those that I have not met in person, thanks for making it. And hopefully there'll be some inspiration in the talk I give today, and we can find some opportunities for future collaboration. So without further ado, I will share my screen here. I think that'll work. All right, Caitlin, does that look good?
It does. Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Okay. But do you see the stop share in the top? Or does it look okay? I'll go.
I do not see that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
great. All right, so this is our overview. I'll give a little bit of the backstory about why we want to care about this issue of salt and salt use, and kind of how SaltWise came to be. A bit on SaltWise practices and getting the word out about those practices, and then some of the SaltWise leaders that we have across the state, and then ending up with some thoughts for us as individuals, as representatives of different agencies, how we can be SaltWise. So the primary source of salt in our surface and groundwater in Wisconsin is road salt. It's not the only source. We also see chloride coming in from water softeners and from potassium chloride fertilizers. Obviously, some of that chloride ends up in manure. So we have sodium chloride. When we talk about salt, that's the main salt that we are discussing. Sodium and chloride are the two components or constituents of that. So road salt, like I mentioned, primary source. We literally bring mountains of salt into our state every year. Wisconsin naturally doesn't really have any salt. Our freshwater has been very, very fresh. But we are slowly changing that year by year. as we bring salt into our state, it melts snow and ice. It then moves with that salty snow melt directly into lakes and streams. If it doesn't move directly there, it is infiltrating through our soils into our groundwater. So all the salt we bring into Wisconsin ends up in our water. And that is a really big point that a lot of us can lose touch with because salt seems to just disappear, right? But as we know from years of experience now thinking about climate change, we bring, gas, we put it into our cars, it seems to disappear. It doesn't, nothing disappears, right? It all goes somewhere. So the salt is going into our water. So this graphic here on the right kind of shows that diet of salt has continued to go up and up in our country, and with it, the salt in our water. So Carp C focused in the Dane County region, or in Dane County. We've got beautiful lakes here, the Hara Lakes, that are being impacted by that salty diet. And this, it'll show you, for those of you who are not based in the Madison area, is also happening across the state. But Saltwise started in the Madison area as scientists and agency officials began to take a deeper dive into what was happening with this salinization. So we have chloride levels here on the y-axis. So again, salt being sodium chloride, chloride moving more readily through the soils because it's negatively charged, getting into our water at higher rates than the sodium. So since we started putting salt down in our city on roads, those salt levels just climbing up and up. Lake Wingra, being the smallest lake, has the least ability to dilute the salts coming in, also leads to higher variability in those salt levels. I mentioned salt is not just showing up though in our lakes and streams, it's also making its way into our groundwater, which for most of us in Wisconsin is our drinking water. So we do see, again, chloride levels here on the left increasing slowly but surely. Naturally in Wisconsin, I mentioned our water is very fresh, so chloride levels would be pretty close to zero, like 0 to 10 in a few parts of the state, but we're by and large not there anymore. So this top whisker on the plot is well 14, located right here, right along University Avenue, the saltiest of our wells, where some people say they can taste the salt. It hasn't technically reached the EPA taste threshold. That's actually at 250 milligrams per liter. I think we know some people are more sensitive than others. And then along with chloride, some of that sodium is showing up in our wells. And for people who are supposed to be on extremely restrictive sodium diets, the sodium in their drinking water may be an issue. So I mentioned Saltwise starting in the Madison area. So these are some of those early partners. But since 2020, we've been connecting with other agencies across the state that have been doing work in this field and bringing in new partners and continuing to kind of grow the work of Saltwise. So thanks to the Fund for Lake Michigan, right now we have funding to work statewide across Wisconsin. Because I mentioned this is a statewide issue, right? And it's not just statewide, right? We're seeing this across the northern US, other countries as well, where we've taken to using large amounts of salt to deal with winter maintenance, and that salt's showing up in our water. So again, naturally, chloride concentration is pretty much close to zero, this deepest of purple dots, but we're now seeing chloride concentrations in the tens, the hundreds, and even the thousands of milligrams per liter. So that's definitely at and above what's considered toxic to aquatic organisms. Newest research out of Ohio is showing us that we're seeing significant declines in zooplankton, some of the more sensitive species in our water, at 50 milligrams per liter. So yes, this is a problem statewide. We're seeing the highest concentrations around the Milwaukee area, where we have a lot of pavement, a lot of salt going down. We do have some chloride concentrations up in the high hundreds to I think some in the thousands in Madison. It's not captured on this map that was put together a few years ago by a grad student out of UW-Madison, but that data is available through CARP-C's Starkweather Creek project. You also see this salinity plume here. This is coming out of Mill Creek in Marshfield. It's a pretty small creek. So again, doesn't have much ability to dilute the salt that's coming in. And there are probably other mill creeks around Wisconsin with the really, really high levels, but we just don't necessarily have the most comprehensive monitoring right now for chloride. Where we do have some really great monitoring though is coming out of Sewer Pack. So this is our neighbor to the east, southeastern Wisconsin's Regional Planning Commission. Like CARP-C, they are doing a multi-year study, or just finishing up a multi-year study of monitoring and also looking at sources of chloride into local streams. So we see here, again, chloride levels on the y-axis from 2018 through 2021. And this is where they've gone out and taken grab samples and tried to catch some of those peak events. So we see during snowmelt events, kind of mid to late winter, I guess depends on how late winter goes in Wisconsin, where we have snowmelt flushing a lot of that salt laden snow into local streams, and concentrations going up into the thousands of milligrams per liter. So currently the Wisconsin DNR has set two limits. One is a chronic toxicity limit here at 395. One is an acute toxicity limit at 757. So I would argue these limits should both be lower than they are, but where they're at, we're saying anything above this orange dashed line is a kill me slow. Organisms exposed to that level of salt over time are experiencing negative impacts. And the red dashed line is a kill me fast, just short doses at those concentrations are detrimental. And to put these numbers that maybe not everybody on the program right now is a chemist and talks about milligrams per liters on a daily basis. This 395 is about 1 teaspoon of salt in 5 gallons of water. So when we're doing outreach work, I'd like to remind people every teaspoon of salt you can keep out of our water, you're protecting 5 gallons of water. Oh, I want to go back for just a second. Another really compelling piece of information to take away from this graph is what's happening, or should I say not happening, in the summer months. So even in June, July, August, October, months after we've put salt down, we don't see those chloride concentrations go back down to baseline levels anymore. We're not getting back down to zero or close to it. So at least not in some of these streams. So what we're seeing is that our groundwater has become salty. And so even in summer months, we're recharging our streams with salty water. Sometimes rain events can dilute that and bring those concentrations down. But our streams are now, a number of them remaining pretty salty year round. So this map of the state's public water system, so these are municipal drinking water wells, some wells maybe from churches or other like bars. We're looking at chloride levels right now in people's drinking water. Again, chloride being that marker of human contamination of our drinking water, because naturally we pretty much have zero chloride across the state. So we're not in that zero range anymore. We're seeing, again, numbers in the tens, even the hundreds, hopefully not in the thousands. We would not want to be drinking that water. And technically the EPA's drinking water criteria, it's considered a secondary criteria because it's based on taste for chloride, is at 250 milligrams per liter. So we are seeing that scattered around the state. A lot of focus on water today. That is a big driver for a lot of us, but people who are on this call as elected officials, as property owners, you might be thinking about the damage that salt does to your property. Nationwide, those figures are pretty large. You yourself maybe have had to replace vegetation, bushes, redo grass along sidewalks. Maybe you've had to take out doors, replace door jambs. replace or more quickly replace vehicles that have been damaged by salt. So for every $1 we spend on salt, we're doing about $10 of damage to our infrastructure. So the cost of salt looks a little less cheap, right? Salt's not as cheap when we really look at that full cost of this material and the damage that it does. But the cost of salt itself has nearly tripled in the last 20 years. And that's caused some of the bigger users like the Wisconsin DOT to think twice about the amount of salt that they're using. So for me, this is my perspective. This is a really good trend because it forces people to think about using this material more efficiently. So how can we do that? What are those practices? Number one, education. I used to be a classroom teacher. I don't know that my favorite is to have everyone sit down in chairs because, as Caitlin mentioned, I also used to teach in more kind of nature-based or experiential settings. But we do a mix of that salt-wise, and I'll explain more. But we do have some classroom smart salting classes that are geared towards folks who maintain our roads, as you can see from this photo, as well as other events and programs for people who maintain parking lots and sidewalks. So just a quick preview, I took a couple screenshots today from our website, and this is our fall, some of our fall events, more to come. If the blue, they're highlighted in blue, it means that signups are available, but not all of them are quite there yet. But we're gonna have a lineup of smart salting roads classes, as well as classes for parking lots and sidewalks, custodial staff, facility staff across the state. And if anybody wants to get on the list and kind of be notified when these classes are available, you can always shoot me an email. We can put you on that mailing list. So there's kind of the the core knowledge, but then also technical skills. A lot of smart winter maintenance has to do with good mechanical removal. And so I wanted to share this photo from the City of Superior's in-house skills course. You can see they're trying to collect these tennis balls without hitting the cones. In the state of Wisconsin, we had the APWA Snowplow Rodeo, and there's actually a national snowplow rodeo I've had the pleasure of going out to in Colorado. So I want to at least make mention of this piece as well. But what are those best practices that we're asking people to adopt? This is a quick overview. This came from a research paper out of Bill Hintz's lab, a collaborative research group of scientists looking into this issue and really encouraging people to move towards these best practices. So I'm going to just skim over a few of them today. This is not a deep dive on the technical side, but we'd be happy to have you join us for that down the road. So I mentioned already mechanical removal, and I can't say that enough. Salt is not meant to be used to burn through snow melt. Salt's function should really be to be breaking that bond between snow and the pavement so that you can get in there with the plow blade and move that snow. So we got plow blades, we've got segmented blades, bushing blades. What else do I say? Like the more like squeegee blades, like Yoma, like rubber blades. There's a lot of different technologies that are coming on the market. We've got brush tools that can be used on parking lots and sidewalks. But part of it too, and I'll go back to this a little later, is looking at our policies and practices and making sure that we are emphasizing mechanical removal. So the city of Appleton made a big move a couple of years ago to change their cutoff for when they came out with the plows. So before this, they were salting their streets. If there were 2 inches or less of snow, they were trying to just burn that snow off. And they made the switch to say, no, like we want to plow. We're going to move the snow and just use salt for that, kind of breaking that bond. So they now, this is really pretty aggressive, but they are plowing mains with just a 1/4 inch of snow. Residential is 1.5 inches of snow instead of going at it with salt first. When you have made the decision that it's time for salt to go out, We really need to have every piece of equipment calibrated so you know how much salt you are putting down and can make applications of the right amount of the right material at the right time. So this is an example from Cudahy, just south of Milwaukee. They had a truck. Actually, they calibrated all their trucks, but this is one of the worst. It was supposed to be putting down 300 pounds per lane mile. And when they calibrated it, they realized it was actually putting down 850 pounds per lane mile. So they were putting down almost triple the amount of salt every lane mile. So just calibrating their equipment alone saved them over 40% in salt. And that is huge. But unfortunately, it's actually fairly common. Calibration saved people in that first year. If you're able to keep those dollars in-house, and you can reinvest those in better equipment. So calibration itself takes a bit of time, but you can calibrate anything, and I shouldn't say a bit of time. Once you get the system down, it's pretty quick, but it doesn't require really money. It's just an investment in time. And then you get a good return on investment too. So calibrating that equipment, and then they were able to put those dollars into more liquid capable equipment where they could use liquid salt brine to do anti-icing before the storm. And that works like putting some oil on your skillet before you cook the food. You put a little bit of brine down before the storm. When the snow comes, you prevent the formation of that bond between the snow and the pavement. So that combined with, again, training, that education piece, they reduced their salt use by practically 69.9, 70%, and saved almost $100,000 in 1 year. So mechanical removal, calibration, and then what are those rates that you're using? This is an example from the city of Stevens Point. Took this photo right inside. You can see the cab of their truck. I kind of obscured up here. This says air temp and then pavement temperature right below it. So drivers have pavement temperature sensors right in their truck. If you don't have that, handheld temperature sensors can work also. But this is showing that they are adjusting their application rates based on pavement temperature. So this is the real science of salt use. Salt, a given amount of salt always melts the same amount of snow or ice, but it works a lot more slowly as those temperatures go down. Everything moves more slowly as temperature goes down, right? Temperature is literally a measure of the kinetic energy of the molecules. So what do we need to do then if we want those results of clearing the snow is put down a little bit more. So you see that adjustment from 120 pounds per lane mile at 30 and above down to 280 pounds per lane mile as we get close to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Now below 15, salt, pure salt, sodium chloride, not really effective because it's working so slowly. You want to move and bring in another chloride or an additive. Usually it's calcium chloride or magnesium chloride that have lower effective melting temperatures. GeoMelt is a proprietary mix that has some additional chlorides, but also an egg component. So it's a sugar that prevents refreeze. So that's what we see them moving to below 15. I threw in this slide because I just wanted to remind people this is not just a roads problem. We also see a lot of excess salt going down on parking lots and sidewalks, and we can see improvements there too. And this is not a question of keeping people safe or protecting our water. We can do both. So this is a photo from the yard at the Bruce Company, just down the road here in Middleton. They reduced salt use on a number of their sites by over 50%. This was training their staff, back to number one, calibrating their equipment, number two, and then using that brine for anti-icing and paying attention to total rates. But so this is a big brine truck that they have here. You can see the boom behind it. And then these are some sidewalk sprayers that they have as well. So we've been doing some anti-icing on sidewalks. So practices, number one, overall, right? But also communicating what you're doing is super important. So SaltWise tries to do a lot of that and provide a lot of support around communications. We've got a lot of social media accounts. Please follow us. That really helps with the grant writing. We have some different print materials every year in January, Salt Awareness Week, with a week of webinars and sometimes a few in-person events around the state. We have different municipalities will help spread the word about that. So if you're not doing that already, through your media channels on your social media and website, we'd love to connect with you more. The city of Wausau even put out a proclamation in honor of Salt Awareness Week, which was pretty fun this last year. And then a number of cities are really running with this. So City of Madison has put together some different videos for residents. I worked with them on an annual column in their waterways periodical through the city engineering department. The city of Oshkosh worked with me to get a flyer out. I think this is in their water utility bill for residents, but this went out. This is just a snip of what went out to residents last fall. The city of Eau Claire Streets Department has their own Twitter account that is hilarious. So if you're not following this, I would recommend I steal some of their hashtags: leave early, leave space, stay home, stay safe. And I love that they're sending out reminders to residents about how residents can support smart salting by working on parking where they need to be. So we don't have those snow islands out there to clean up afterwards. It's a lot easier to clean up the first time well, and letting residents know kind of where they're at, what they're doing. So that communication, whether it's through social media or other media, is super important. This is a video. Caitlin, you might need to pop on. If it doesn't work, let me know. But I'm going to try to share this PSA that we're working on. It's not quite finalized yet with the city of Milwaukee. Let's see. That might be a no-go. So I'm gonna, okay, there we go. We popped onto the next thing. So I can share a link if people want to see that. We've got a few PSAs in the works. One is a super generic PSA, so if people would like that for a 30-second message to residents. And then we've got a couple others we're working on too that are specific to different communities. We also work to get the word out through teachers. So I've presented to science teachers at their annual symposium for a couple of years now. We've got lessons for elementary school students as well as high school students. This is really excellent lesson put together by a former master's student out of Milwaukee, diving into her research, looking at how salt in streams impacts bacterial communities all the way up through the ecosystem. Anybody can really be a scientist though. If you are pumped up about this issue in particular and you would want to go out by yourself or with young kids in your life, we can have folks get free test strips through our partner, the Isaac Walton League, and you can test chloride levels at local streams and share that data in through a citizen science monitoring program. We're also getting out in the communities, working with partners to spread the word about taking care of our water, keeping Wisconsin's fresh water fresh. I wanted to put up here, this happened a few years ago, partnered with Tyler Leeper at Winkler Boats, spreading the word about water softeners. I've been focusing a lot on road salt, but water softeners do contribute to this issue, although not directly in Lake Winkra. But water softener salt is either moving into your septic and potentially your wells if you're on a private well, or it's going to your wastewater treatment plant and then being discharged downstream because our wastewater treatment plants cannot pull that salt out. So made some little buoys out of old water softeners. We have a beautiful sculpture, mural, I should say, kind of water softener and information for people. Just showing you more collaboration that's happened. Worked with Charlie Behrens on our Salt Awareness Week intro this year. Done some work with aerial silk artists, spreading the word about water quality at events. Oh, Charlie wanted to say hi. I can share that one out later too. So Saltwise leadership, we've had a number of municipal champions across the state. Those are all summarized on our website. So if you want to read more, I mentioned, City of Appleton and Cudahy, we've got more of those stories available. And we really, really have tried in the last few years to get out in the state and meet with partners and promote active sharing of best practices, hurdles, so we can all work to kind of overcome those and get better, faster together. So we've got Corey Teets here from the city of Eau Claire, a couple photos from an event in the La Crosse area up in Onalaska. When we had these events, we really worked to get the press there so that we can not only educate operators and street superintendents and folks in the public works department, but let residents know what their communities are doing. So these are a few of the open houses that we have on the books right now. Again, this is kind of building yet up our fall schedule, but I did just add I know the majority of people on this call are from the Madison area. So we have a USDA Forest Products Lab hosted event. So this is going to be a parking lots and sidewalks event. This will both be we will have both a smart salting class and an open house at the Forest Products Lab. So you can choose, one or both of those. And really excited about this because USDA Forest Products Lab has not only been using brine, but they've been capturing waste brine from their water softener. So they've mostly eliminated the purchase of winter road salt. They are taking the water softener salt that goes through the water softener, capturing the chloride, the waste magnesium and calcium, those like hardness ions, and using that as their de-icing material. So a really cool story of pulling salt out of the waste stream. We also have the city of Sun Prairie just this morning committed to hosting an open house. I was able to visit their staff really recently, and they're doing a ton. Their current salt application rates are even lower than what you saw with Stevens Point. They're running typically, I heard, 100 pounds per lane mile of pre-wet salt. And that's after just oftentimes just once at the end of the event. So plowing as much as possible, I should say anti-icing. So there's some salt that goes down in brine form, plowing, and then the last run, putting down really precise applications of salt. So we recognize not everybody though can make it to those in-person events. So also have webinars every month where people are sharing stories. A lot of these are, you can see some of those partners again, like Corey from the city of Eau Claire, talking about what's happening, what their successes have been, again, hurdles, how they're working to overcome them. We have that at the city level, kind of the county level. This is Bill Kern from Jefferson County, as well as perspectives on the policy side. Scientists, Bob and Kevin are from Ohio and Michigan, respectively, sharing some of the research that they're seeing in their states in terms of impacts of salt on organisms. So I also snipped here on the right side of the screen. You can see the upcoming webinars that we have. So anybody here, be welcome to join in. May, this is going to be a little bit more road salt focused. The June event focused more on parking lots and sidewalks. One on the damages, and then two, kind of how we can do this better and not damage our property and not damage our water. And then both the July and the August are a bit more on the monitoring policy sides. I also wanted to put in a plug for municipalities, but this could be anybody, and spreading the word yourself. I was invited to attend this event up in River Falls a couple years ago. I'm actually going to be working with the city of Stevens Point on a similar event, kind of a touch a truck event with local elementary school kids. So this event up in River Falls was for all area second graders, public and private schools. The city went to every single elementary school, brought kind of their fleet of trucks, one of each anyway, and then talked with the kids. The kids got to jump up in the truck and see everything. And then with the salt truck, they got to see the spinner. They got to hear about what their city was doing. You can maybe see this 5-gallon bucket in the background here. Again, that knowledge that 1 teaspoon of salt pollutes 5 gallons of water was shared with elementary school kids. And they learned, though, not only that this is a problem, but they learned that their city is doing everything they can to minimize that salt pollution. So really a powerful, impactful message to get kids at the right age, the kids who will be, our future residents and decision makers. Not quite as much fun to look at, but very important is to take a look at your municipality or your organization's policies. So a lot of times I think these may be documents that sit on the shelf, but it's important to revisit because I've seen some that are extremely outdated. It's important that you have those and are, I think it's worth revisiting, questioning, are these policies in line with our practices? Are they not? Kind of putting into words what our practices are and what we want them to be. So these are just a couple of snips from the city of Monona, obviously policy. They have that note in here that salt is really effective when our temperatures are above 15. Kind of below that, we need to, maybe not rely on salt and just put more and more salt down. Also reference anti-icing, right? That putting that brine down before the storm. So they in the city of Monona also, I didn't only snip so much, but they're not salting every street. They're focusing on hills and intersections, kind of problem areas. But I know that kind of across the state, we see a lot of variation in how municipalities are currently addressing snow on streets. And I think as a state, we need to move away from providing residents with this bare pavement on every street. Maybe because of the ability to put salt down at high rates on county highways or state highways, people have in their mind the idea that roads can be completely clear, but looking big picture, the costs of that are just too great on our residential streets. I think we really need to look at our policies. If residential streets are pretty flat, if people should be going 20 miles an hour, we don't need to work those with salt down to bare pavement throughout the winter. Another policy, I'm gonna say battle right now, but another thing that we're doing related to policy is working with our state legislature on a bill that would create a de-icer certification program. So this is modeled after a program in New Hampshire, and we had a crew of people testify in front of a Senate committee and as well as Assembly committee last month. Since then, we had some revisions made, and this is still an active bill. If you see that salt is an issue and you see that per my photo in the background here, that a lot of that oversalting happens on parking lots and sidewalks driven by that fear of liability, potentially fear of liability slash lack of information on how much salt is needed and how salt works, then it would be excellent if you wanted to reach out to your legislator and let them know that you're in support of this. This is a snip right from our website. So if you go to our homepage, you can click on this. It will take you to a template letter as well as a link to look up contact information for your legislator. So are you salt wise? Can you be salt wise? A number of ways to do that by both adopting as well as promoting salt wise practices, communicating the expectations that you have, expectations that we need others to have, being a leader and sharing what you are doing, sharing the word kind of through your networks, And if you have other ideas about ways to do that, I am always happy to collaborate. So I've mentioned PSAs and mailings, aerial silks, some hidden talents. Maybe you have famous cousins like Charlie or other connections. Yeah, I've really loved this work over the last several years. It's been really incredible to connect with people across the state that are passionate about protecting our freshwater by doing winter maintenance right. So would love to kind of have you join the Saltwise community. So with that, I will pass it back to Caitlin for any questions.
Thank you so much, Allison. So the floor is now open for any questions that you all might have. I don't see anything yet in the Q&A or the chat. So now is the time. We can wait.
And I will put, that would come through as a link, maybe not. Well, wysaltwise.com is the link to the website. If anybody wants to reach out to me, wysaltwise@gmail.com. Happy to get people on the mailing list, send out a quarterly newsletter.
Yeah, and we can, in our follow-up email for this webinar, we can include some links to those trainings and events that you talked about, Allison. We can also include a link to the video for the Milwaukee PSA, and if there are any other PSAs, I know you mentioned a couple others that you have. We can share our Starkweather Creek chlorides management plan if people are interested in learning more about that.
Cool.
It looks like we do have one question from Derek Field. Will you be able to share the slides after this presentation? I really liked the graphs, sodium graphs in surface and drinking water specifically. Yeah, and the answer to that is yes, we will share the slides.
Easy.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I should mention also, Derek, that I'm working with Kevin Masaryk from the groundwater. He's the groundwater specialist at UW-Stevens Point and the water lab there. So we're working on a dashboard, an interactive dashboard, so people will be able to look at both sodium and chloride levels in groundwater across the state. So you can right now look at chloride levels through the well water viewer put out by UW-Stevens Point, but that's just looking at private water, private wells. So we're working on a dashboard that would allow people to look at what's happening in our municipal water. But I'll put that link in for the well water viewer too.
Awesome. Yeah, that does sound like a really important resource. It'd be cool to put that together.
Cool.
Well, if we don't have any more questions coming in, I think we can wrap up for today. So on behalf of all of us at RPC and the MPO, we thank you for taking the time to join us today. We hope that the information that Allison shared will help you implement your own saltwise practices, either at home or in your communities or organizations. As I mentioned before, we'll be sending out a follow-up email probably this afternoon that would have links to the recording. I'll have a link to the slides and some of the other materials and resources that we've talked about. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out with any questions or if you would like more information on anything specific. We do have several other webinar sessions coming up throughout the rest of this year. We'll be talking about things like our regional tree canopy, performance indicators for our regional plans, planning for electric vehicles. Those are all things we have in the works for our joint series for 2023. We'll also be hosting a couple of webinars related to solar development as we pursue a regional SolSmart designation. So keep an eye out for more details on those. And with that, have a great day. Thank you again for attending.
Thank you.